Hi guys, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. Gemma here. I wanted to do another video that was requested by one of the members in our WhatsApp group, which is how to date with OCD. Now, dating with OCD can feel super scary. We're usually waiting for that just right feeling or that feeling better before we start dating, because we feel like if we don't feel better before we start dating, then it's going to overwhelm us, be too much to handle. Possibly fears will latch to that person, which of course, when you're struggling with OCD, you're always trying to avoid more fears latching. So you will avoid situations which you know may bring up those fears. Let's say you're a person that's previously had ROCD. You may avoid dating because you don't want those same fears to latch again. So the important thing to remember with this is that those fears are going to latch on in other aspects of your life if you avoid dating. So let's say you're someone who experiences ROCD and you decide not to date based off of that. The likelihood is those fears, because they are still there, they are still fears that you have, there's still some beliefs there, they're going to latch on to your parents or your friends or your pets. ROCD is not exclusive to intimate relationships. Yes, some people struggle more with intimate relationships, but in general, if you have that belief system, you are going to struggle with other relationships as well. So with ROCD and dating, well, not even ROCD, just OCD in general and dating, it's super important that you do not avoid dating, because if you avoid dating, you are just going to make it worse. You're going to ensure that you never get better because you're not exposing yourself to that situation that you are avoiding. So when you avoid anything, you tell your brain, this thing is to be feared, therefore I'm not going to do it. When you tell your brain through your actions, the action in this instance being not dating, that thing is scary, your brain is going to fire off those signals of there is a danger here, we're not doing this, therefore this must be dangerous, therefore we're not going to do it. So you just reinforce that cycle. It's super important that you're not waiting for the right time to date as well. So whatever goal it is that you have in your mind of, I want to be recovered before I date, or I want to at least be in a much better place before I date, the chances are you're not going to recover and you're not going to get into a better place because there's still avoidance behaviours present. And if there's avoidance behaviours present, that's not compatible with recovery, unfortunately. You have to be willing to do everything and experience everything in order to get to a robust level with recovery. Now, I know that a lot of people watching this with similar fears will be like, oh yeah, but I'd just like to get a little bit better before I start dating. But if dating is something that you're avoiding, when you start doing it, it's going to make you feel worse because you're cutting an avoidance behavior. You're taking a compulsion out of the equation. And as we know, compulsions are little illusions of safety. They are what we think is keeping us safe in those situations, when in actual fact, they're just reinforcing the cycle. So even if you're waiting to feel a bit better once you do start dating again, if that is something you've been avoiding, the chances are you're going to feel worse for a period of time until you actually put yourself in that situation and go through with it. You aren't going to get over the fear of doing it. It's like saying, I have POCD, but I'm going to recover without ever going near a child, or like I'm going to avoid children and, eventually I'll get over POCD. The chances of that are pretty slim. I would say maybe even none. The same as, let's say, contamination OCD. I have contamination OCD, but I'm going to get over it just by working on my beliefs, and I'm not going to ever do an exposure. I'm not going to touch anything that I think is contaminated. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get over a fear if you don't expose yourself to that fear. Obviously, there are certain things which don't need exposures, but, that's a separate video. For this instance, if dating is something that you're avoiding, you have to put yourself into that situation. Now, I know that what your brain will do, what you will do, is try and think of other reasons not to date. That aren't based off of your OCD, because that's what OCD does. It will be that fear that's stopping you, but you will think of another reason. Well, actually, it's not good for me to date at the moment because I have only been out of a relationship for a year and I might not be ready for one, or I'm not dating at the moment because I don't have a stable living situation. You know, I'm not living on my own, I'm living back with parents. So how would I be able to date? Because I wouldn't be able to bring anyone back to my house ever. Or how I don't have a car at the moment, I won't be able to pick anyone up to date them. So how would I be able to date? So what you'll do is you'll try and find excuses. And that's what they are, they're excuses, because you can date in any situation. Yes, there are some circumstances in which I would say that maybe it's actually better not to date for a period of time. So I do advise that to people who, let's say, have a fear of being on their own and they get out of a relationship and immediately want to jump into dating. I would normally say to people in that situation that it's probably actually better for you not to date for a period of time, because that discomfort of being alone is going to be a lot harder for you. It's all dependent on what your fear is. You know, nothing that we say is ever blanket advice for everyone. You know, every person is going to have individual needs and things that are better for them to do. You know, an exposure for one person is a compulsion for another. So it's really important that we always look at everyone's individual cases. But, you know, in these videos, of course, we just have to give the most general advice we can to the biggest audience we can, because we want to help as many people as possible. But I would say it's really important to look at what the exact fear that you have around dating is in order to work out exactly the best way in which to combat that. If you're avoiding dating for purposes of not wanting to overwhelm yourself or not wanting to get into a relationship unless it's just right or anything like that, I would always recommend dating in those circumstances. But as I say, there are some circumstances in which I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, I mean, if you want to pop a comment below with your situation, we can absolutely respond and let you know what we think would be best for your situation. Or if you think you would benefit from coaching services, we do offer those, and you just pop an email to phil@ocdrecovery.com and, you know, we can go over these fears with you in more detail. But I hope you found this video helpful, and I'll see you guys on the next one.